They're not confident in the path that they have laid out for themselves.
Thinking that will pull it all together. This is the missing piece type of thing. And that is very rarely the case.
Yeah.
No more excuses. No more branding band-aids. The art of positioning. Let's freaking go. Now's my time and I won't hesitate. Most businesses grow by doing more. More offers, more locations, more brands sitting under the same roof. And most of the time, that's exactly where positioning goes to RIP. Today, we're getting into how you actually stack brands, offers, or even locations without turning your business into a confusing multi-hyphenate that nobody can explain over a catch-up. As usual, we've got two fresh AF angles, or rather, people on hot seats. John Hanrahan is in one hot seat. He's the founder and franchise strategist of Emerald Franchise Group, whose 4x EBITDA at a multi-billion-dollar automotive portfolio, and the man who went anonymously viral across news outlets on Halloween in 2016. What does a person even do on Halloween that ends up across every major network? And how are you still not telling people? What?
Thanks for having me, Beatrice. And how do you do it? You dress up your 3-year-old in a donut costume on an airplane and on Halloween because she cannot go trick-or-treating on her own because you had to go to a wedding and fly back across the country on Halloween. And you hand out candy and granola bars to all the people on the plane and have her walk down the aisle trick-or-treating with all the folks on the airplane. Logan to SFO, Boston to San Francisco.
That's cute.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh,
and so God. I did not want to, I wanted to stay anonymous because it would have put her in a spotlight that as a 3-year-old, she didn't ask for. And
yeah.
Honestly, there was an intrigue about the mystery of keeping it a mystery, with all the different news outlets trying to find out who I was. That was kind of fun to be chased.
Has she wanted to do it since?
That's a good question. I think she really enjoys Halloween too much now to skip it because she definitely gets more candy roaming through the neighborhood than she did on there. But yeah, I handed out little pieces of paper that explained the situation to each of the folks. Some folks were a little bit startled when I handed them a piece of paper walking down the aisle on an airplane shortly after takeoff. But it's a little bit of, oh no, I don't want anything you were selling, but
it's not me.
But then,
fair enough. All right.
But then they quickly turned around. It was fun.
Nice. So in the next hot seat is Amanda Green, who's never stopped being a journalist. She's won the Edward R. Murrow Award, who's also the builder of newsroom systems inside businesses and the author of a first grade story called The Troll That Lived on Pluto. Why Pluto? And will there be a spin-off?
No spin-off. So sure, I have more recent accolades, but in first grade I wrote a story called The Troll That Lived on Pluto, and I like to say and that was my first writing award. It really was. So 6-year-old me came up with I wish I had it in front of me so I could give you guys an excerpt, but yeah. So I've been writing my whole life. I've always known that I wanted to tell stories, not as a science fiction writer. In fact, I don't even read science fiction much, but yeah, so it kind of launched me down a path to where I am today in an odd way.
Do you think it'll ever make a resurface? Pick a different planet or
if you really want me to. Maybe I'll ask ChatGPT to write it for me. I'll feed it in and say, give me a... No?
Oh, no. Fair enough. All right, let's jump right in. I'm seeing a lot of businesses. They add a second, third, fourth, fifth brand or offer because the opportunity looks too good from like a conversation or a customer remark or something they saw others in the industry doing. But what do you guys reckon? Is it the fear of missing out, fear of being left behind, the drive to keep momentum? Like, what do you think that cause is to just be like, hey, let's add this in, let's add that in?
It is enhancement of a business, right? When you're a business owner, you always have, it's hard to stick to your phases sometimes. And as a business owner, small or big, you want to move faster. And a lot of those early ideas that you hatch in, pre-launch of whatever business it is, or as you're starting to get grounded, they're too enticing to lay off sometimes. So that's a big mistake that a lot of businesses make, that they just add too quickly. They're just not ready. And it may not even be, that CEO or that board. Sure, they might be ready to manage it. Staff may not be ready. The shared services may not be ready. The marketplace may not be ready. And from a franchising perspective, you're adding brands in and you have an existing franchise network. Well, then those franchisees better be ready as well, because they're going to want that brand. If they're not ready, well, then they're going to run into trouble. They'll bite off too much too soon. But so I think it's a lot. I think there's could be some fear of missing out stuff going on in some scenarios. Whenever you have a good idea in business, I think, there's a very high temptation to, let's do it now. Let's just do it. Let's get it going. Because you don't want someone else to jump in and take that momentum. Because if you're thinking about it, there's probably a lot of other people thinking about that idea as well.
I was going to say, if it seems like you're like kind of jumping in and launching random campaigns or random new brands, and I'm saying random because it feels kind of like on a whim, you're deciding this is something that we want to do because we're answering to what seems to be working for someone else or what's going viral. I think a lot of times maybe the brands that jump into that a lot might be feeling a lack of confidence in their original strategy, or a lack of strategy or a lack of system for implementing what they already are, on the path that they're on. Like they're not confident in the path that they have laid out for themselves. I don't know. That's my thought.
Amanda, I think that's a valid point. There's definitely been a lot of business mistakes throughout history where it's a scenario of like having a baby to save the marriage, and it thinking that will pull it all together. This is the missing piece type of thing, and that is very rarely the case.
Yeah,
there are so many things that need to be properly structured with just one brand, one service, one product, whatever that business does, to layer something else in for that adding the baby in, right? Then as another really big mouth to feed.
Right. No, that's a good point. Yeah.
I see that a lot with, people going into rebrands as well, where they're like, oh, or the CEO, like a new CEO joins and like, oh, we want to leave our mark on the business. And you just jump straight into like, let's do something new without really fully acknowledging where everything is at. So these pieces start breaking as well.
Yeah, in the PR, you go ahead.
Force it in to solve a problem. Oh, sorry, Amanda, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that in the PR world, I think that a lot of times in my experience is that brands will come in looking for, thinking that public relations is going to be their saving grace. They're already struggling as a business, and that's not the time to start, PR. And, but, they come in because they're like, oh, I have an idea. I'm going to launch this thing and I just want lots of press coverage for it. And I want it to be in the New York Times and I want everybody to be talking about it. And most of the time, journalists can smell the desperation and it doesn't work.
You're about to say something, John?
I think some of the check boxes when someone's thinking about adding a brand into their business portfolio, whether it's, the parent company, an additional offering, or, from a franchisee perspective, it needs to add leverage, right? If it adds confusion or additional complexity or some sort of a divided focus amongst your existing staff, it's working against itself at that point, right? And there's more than just this seems to make sense or this aligns with our existing business. There's far more below the surface than that. That's a starting point. Absolutely. Right. The same customers, maybe buying that product or service. Great place to identify it. But where I see a lot of business owners, founders, boards, executives make the mistake is they stop too early in their analysis. And they don't fully see, don't fully analyze the ripple effects of dropping that pebble into the water.
And that's the thing, like it starts pulling that attention, be it from budget, be it from energy from one of the other areas in the business, marketing, PR, operations, etc. But okay, what would be the first signs that this is broken? That there might be something wrong with like this new addition before it's too late that you guys have seen?
I definitely have seen it. Amanda, you were just about to say, why don't you can go first.
Oh, I was going to say, so I come from this, from the storytelling point of view. And so whenever I'm seeing this with brands, it is usually that they have created something that isn't serving the audience. Instead, they are answering to either shareholders or somebody like that who isn't necessarily their end user, or it's something that, again, like they saw somebody else do and they want to copy that to be successful. And so I think that when I'm seeing it with brands, it's usually those are the reasons why, is because they're not matching. What they're asking for doesn't match what their audience is looking for.
So there's like that disconnect in terms of like people start mentioning, hey, I thought that you represented X, Y,
or it just
Z.
lands flat. It doesn't, nobody questions it. Nobody asks about it. You launch and it goes nowhere.
That I feel like happens so frequently that they we just presume that it worked well, but there's no answer is also an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a clear indication.
Yeah. Like one example where I've seen it is like, let's say TikTok, a company will come in and they'll say, we need to be on TikTok and we need to be on TikTok shops. But they have a B2B audience, and where they really need to be is like in trade publications or on podcasts or somewhere else. And they're just doing it because they think that's what they need in order to go viral or to be successful or to sell a lot of whatever it is that they're selling, and they're not reaching the right place. So
what about you, John? What have you seen?
In franchising, there's different ways that you'll start to see, different places you'll start to see the cracks if it's a bad decision or done too early or rolled out incorrectly. You'll certainly start to feel it in rumbling amongst the staff if there's different support levels that are necessary, right? If you have a commercial B2B service if you have a commercial B2B service that say does works with like dumpsters and like trash compaction, right? And you find that you have a problem with how to haul it away, all that trash. By the way, this is a real life example. I won't mention the brand. But if you have an issue with the cost of hauling it away and you start a brand that does hauling, it sounds very similar. They're very adjacent, but the support mechanism for your internal staff could be very different. The needs of a franchise owner of hauling stuff versus compacting. I mean, it's both trash, right? It's both dumpster stuff. They're right there with each other. The needs could be very different, right? We're talking about very different types of equipment, talking about very different types of maintenance, very different costs from a vehicle perspective. While the labor model might be the same, the execution of it and the support necessary because franchise owners' success is built on their own efforts, but it's also built on how strong the support is. And if the support structures don't align for two models that seem to be very similar, well, then you're going to start to have a divided staff internally. You're going to start taking, instead of you from an accounting or an operations or a technical side, you're doing both brand A and brand B. Well, then when you see the cracks, you're going to start saying, okay, you just do brand B, you just do brand A. And you're starting to water down at that point, potentially your support structure. Right. And so it could crack there. It could also crack if the role of the franchise owner is different, because the unit economics could be very different. And so if brand B that you're loading in can't support a manager or a GM to run the operations, and the owner is really required to be in those operations, and in brand A that they've launched 2 years prior, they're able to work through a GM and manage the manager kind of thing, they're now stuck between two different structures of operating models that they signed up for one, but they need to do this other one. So they end up over hiring, spending more to get this other one going, and you'll see cracks there. And the cracks can come out from a financial perspective, but from a business owner perspective, from a mindset perspective, those cracks can be unseen. And when you start to resent that you felt you had to do this second brand to fix a problem in the first, well, then you're just going to become a little bit malcontent, or, pardon the pun, but disenfranchised, right?
That's a big thing that I see as well for like internal comms. It might be because these areas have, like, one has gotten super direct in terms of the internal communications in one brand or in one location, and the other one is like a totally different style. Imagine from the top now you're trying to give out, like, okay, we're adjusting our message, but then you can't do it the same way in those different areas or different brands. It adds that additional complexity that I don't think that a lot of people really think about or really approach from their communication standpoint, internally and even externally.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how, with franchises in particular, how the internal communications goes leading up to a big launch or reveal of something new. Do they... is it a two-way communication between the franchisor and the franchisee? Or is it more of an announcement where the franchisee ends up feeling like, oh, great, this is something for me to have to do. And maybe they're not on board with it, or maybe it doesn't work for their location or, their customers, or who knows. So that would be an interesting to know, John.
It's a great thought, Amanda, and it all depends on the executive leadership and who they are and how they operate, because it can be done. The communication can be done really well. It can also be done very poorly, and to the point where the sports analogy would be that the player finds out he was traded or she was traded on on Twitter, right? Or on X. They found out from watching TV and there wasn't any communication. That I've seen that in franchising, where there's an announcement made publicly and the franchisees of an existing brand or brands say, huh? We're doing what? And within a franchise structure, franchisor-franchisee relationship, there's always a middle entity. And that is, it's referred to as different things, but most commonly it would be a franchise advisory council, an FAC. And that is like, think of it like regional representative for geographic regional for each area of the country. That is the kind of middle person, kind of the conduit between the franchisees and the executive leadership of the franchisor. And the franchisees are supposed to be communicating with those FAC members, their concerns or what they're looking for out of the relationship, and communicating that to the franchisor, and vice versa, right? And when a franchisor has a new idea or they want to push out a new initiative, or there's something that they want to add in from a script perspective or a marketing perspective or anything, it should go through that FAC first. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of bad franchisor executives who just think that they can just force feed it and push it through. And, if all franchisors were A+, I wouldn't have a business of my own, right? It's fact. There's 3,500 franchise brands in North America. And, if I use a term that my kids love to throw around, most of them are dog water. And I'm a real stickler when it comes to that kind of stuff. And so, because there's too much at stake. There's a lot of individual people's life savings, blood, sweat, tears, whatever, what have you. So that communication piece is so critical to the relationship between the franchisee and franchisor. Bad news is much worse when it's not communicated. Even if it is the same news and you communicate it ahead of time, at least there's time to discuss, to prepare, to plan, what have you, right? Even if it doesn't fit, even if it's awful, at least there was a courtesy even just to bring them into the conversation. I think a lot of executives across many industries become so successful that they feel that they start to lose a little bit of their communication skill set, right? And just, I know, right? So we as a board know what's right. So we're just going to push forward. And in franchising, you can lose your network pretty quickly when you make a bad decision.
I was going to say, I've talked before about like the HR to PR pipeline. And so because employees are able to publicly say whatever they want, or franchisees, whatever, that internal communication actually is part of your external communication plan. Because if something hits the wrong way internally, what's to stop that person from going out and blasting you on the internet or in front of cameras, or maybe not even doing it on purpose necessarily, but it happens. They think that they're saying just kind of one offhanded comment about leadership, and it can turn into a whole thing where somebody ends up getting canceled. And so there is a connection there for sure. Yeah.
We just had like a very similar thought process, because same thing, like I was thinking about, hey, okay, this is internally, but how about externally, where, say, for example, you add in an offer, you add in a brand, or you add in like something where people are confused. They're like, oh, but you also offer this? Like especially John, you mentioned like something that isn't necessarily intrinsically connected, how that could accidentally cannibalize another one. Or, having that communication, like, have you guys seen that break?
Absolutely. And in franchising, there's even an additional layer in there, because there's your internal staff, which needs to get behind whatever initiative that you're pushing through, say rolling out a new brand. And if there's pushback there, you're almost guaranteed that that pushback will be amplified to a pretty significant degree when you get to the franchisees and your franchise owner network. There'll be additional pushback there, but then there's how it rolls out to the public. So there are 3 different layers of necessary buy-in when a franchisor makes a decision, and it's internal and franchisees who are not exactly internal, but you could see them potentially as, right? They're part of it. But then the public perception. Right. And to your point, like, there are lots of brands that just add in simple service offerings, and the public has no idea because it doesn't match their original branding, the actual branding and what they purport that they offer. And from a franchisor perspective, they just think, oh, we'll just put it on a line item of services offered. It's never going to get the right attention, and it'll fall short of expectations for franchisees and the corporate staff and the executives if it just ends up being a line item and something that someone's the salesperson's supposed to mention. So there's an added layer in there of sensitivity, and that can be missed, right? Just because something looks good in the boardroom. I mean, I'm sure we've heard various ways of saying this, 100 different ways, but it's because it looks good in the boardroom or looks good on paper does not mean it looks good in the eye of the public, nor in the franchising world in the eye of your franchisees.
What happens, or what have you seen happen when a franchisee is not on board with, let's say it's a new service offering, and they get that line item, they're told, hey, you guys need to start selling this now. And they're just like, I don't understand it, or I don't like it. How does that affect the greater brand?
It hurts the overall brand. There's a runway of ramp up as well. So there's, usually when you roll out a new service line or a product offering within a franchise network, it's not 100% adoption out of the gate, right? It's usually a staged rollout of initial, call them the guinea pigs or the testers, the early adopters, right? But then after those early adopters have proven to some degree that, yes, this is working and it's doing what we think it will, then the franchisor will start to push and lean a little bit harder. You will almost always, no matter the franchise network, you will get pushback from some percentage of franchisees that it's not the right thing. It's not, the public isn't going to like it. It's not going to make enough money. That you have franchisor, you haven't thought of this and that. It's going to happen. Good franchisors will work with their franchisees to try and get them on board. But really, what's happening in the background is just they're granting the franchisee maybe some more time before they get forceful to force them to adopt it, right? And a lot of that, again, it comes down to executive skill set. Communication skills is so tremendous in that. And really, it's like a version of bedside manner, right? Like it's how is that information being communicated? And is it data backed, right? What type of data is showing that this is the right thing, and how strong is the argument from the franchisor in the corporate office to the franchisee? Yeah, you really should. It's not that you have to do this. You really should want to do this. And that's when you have the data, that's where it becomes easier. But if now, let's say that after some period of grace, that the franchisee does not want to add that service or product in, and the franchisor is still leaning on it, and if it is down to a 5% of the existing network or less that are saying no, that's when the franchisor is going to use their leverage within the franchise agreement, the contract, to force that out there. And it happens. That happens regularly, right? It happens less often with strong, good, reputable, ethical franchisors, but there's a lot that gets. I mean, $5 footlong. I don't work with Subway and work very little in food and beverage. It's a margins ethical issue that I have, but $5 footlong was a huge loss leader for Subway franchisees for so long, and even still, I don't know what they raised it to now, but it still does. It's still, the margins on selling that discounted footlong are razor thin when the margins were already paper thin. So it's eventually you either are forced into it, or you are given a proposal of, hey, why don't maybe this is the time to exit. Why don't we look at how you sell your franchise locations within the network?
I see that occurring even like outside of the franchise world, where brands they're talking about like, hey, we've got, say for example, X amount of like 2-3 offers. And Amanda, I'm sure that you had people approach you be like, oh, we want to talk about this. And you're like, but you also have this other offer. Yeah. I mean, isn't that going to overlap? Have you had that?
I think that, and I feel like I'm going to say this a lot, but it again comes down to the audience. When you have different products or different offers, they're usually for a slightly different person. They're either at a different stage of life, or if it's a business, a different stage of business, or they are at a different price point, or they just have a different reason for wanting to partner, connect, buy from you. And so I think you can have multiple stories going out at the same time, different storylines, different messages for different products or different services, as long as they're tailored to and targeting the right audiences. Or if you have something that, not everything has to be promoted all the time either. So, you can decide that you're going all in on something that's new or something that's, an example would be, holiday season, and you might have a holiday bestseller, and it's fine to go 100% all in on that for a quarter because, because that's when people are buying. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I saw your brain turning.
Amanda,
yeah.
When an organization shifts to, say, that, the Christmas bestseller that they're trying, the holiday bestseller that they're trying to push out,
Sure.
how often do you see that it's pushed too hard, and what the bread and butter that keeps the lights on throughout the course of the rest of the year is just forgotten about for too long, where you get some actual damage going on within the marketplace because you've taken your eye off the ball? Is that something you encounter?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, with any kind of regularity, because that would seem, from my perspective, it would seem very, we have a holiday service product that we want to really lean into, but in order to do that, we need to utilize all of our marketing power, all of our sales power, all of our internal structure support. We need to create a little bubble here as well of staff to support what's going to happen when we push this out over such a fast and furious type of push, that the existing stuff just suffers and competitors can take advantage of that, right?
Yeah.
That would be my worry.
I don't know that I'd say that you push too much, but maybe you're pushing you're not pushing at the right time. So planning and timing, I really think, is everything. And if you're looking at, you say you're putting all of your marketing power behind it. If you're looking at doing everything at once, that's exactly how it's going to feel. But holiday planning is really year round, especially in the PR world. We tell brands that we work with that you should have your holiday promotions planned and know which products you want to promote in the springtime. It really is working like a season or two in advance. And then, so you can do a lot of the PR work and a lot of the planning work in quarters 1, quarter 2, and then you start pushing the paid advertisements and the paid channels later on in the season. But I think if you're trying to do all of it at once, that's probably when it feels overwhelming. And I wouldn't, if you're talking just paid ads, for example, I wouldn't like turn everything off just to do something that's for Christmas. I think that, again, look at the audiences, look at the channels, look at the way that people interact with those channels to decide what goes when. A full content system should really be integrated, and so that you have different channels communicating to the audiences at the same time.
Is there in my mind, planning is king, right?
Mm-hmm.
Queen, right? That's the more you plan, the higher your chances of success. In your world, is there too far out, right, where it just becomes unrealistic that the plan will be adhered to? If we've got our next 3 Christmases planned out, well, the marketplace could do a number of different things in that time. Is that too far? And from an outsider, in my perspective, am I just overthinking it? It's like, no, just 6 months is pretty good, no matter what you're doing, type of thing.
It probably does depend on the industry. If you're working in, like,
Sure.
say, the e-commerce space, that could definitely happen. But if you are in more of a service-based industry, or let's say that I don't know, you're like, think of like the Butterball hotline that happens every single year. They probably have the Butterball turkeys, and I don't know, but they probably have that planned out a year, 2 years in advance of how they're going to promote it for the season. If you look at publications, like Oprah's Favorite Thing gift guide, for example, they are curating products starting in January. They're doing it year round. So can you plan too far out? Yeah, but I think it's important that you have a system that allows you to be agile, and so that you can easily answer to market changes and market demand. And you wouldn't really start promoting a certain offer right away. Like, I think if you're talking about, like, is there something you can do too early? Promotion happening too early can certainly be a waste of money. But yeah.
The too early piece resonates with me because every time I go into Home Depot in October, September, and starting to see the setup of even the small Christmas display, I always scratch my head saying that seems really early. But Home Depot, maybe just because it's Home Depot.
I agree with that. So I have a few retail experts that are in my network, and I've had a lot of conversations with them. And it sounds like retail buyers are on a similar timeline of probably like they're buying for the next season in like quarter 1. But I'll give you an example that I personally ran into this last Halloween with my daughter. So now I've got a kid Halloween story to share. So with my daughter, she wanted to be one of the characters from K-pop Demon Hunters for Halloween this past year. And so we went into the whatever it's called, the pop-up store that happens. I can't think what it's called now. The pop-up store that happens every Halloween where you go and you buy all the costumes.
The K pop-up?
No, it wasn't a K pop-up. That was the problem. So we went into the store, Spirit Halloween. That's what it was. So we went into Spirit Halloween and we looked around for K-pop Demon Hunters. They didn't have anything. So we went to another store. They didn't have anything. And there was the guy who was, just stocking the shelves. He said that there has been insane demand for that costume. Because I was like, are you getting more of them? Are you sold out? They didn't order them because they put their order in so early in the year. It was before that movie even came out, and they had no idea that that was going to blow up the way that it did for Halloween last year. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you have to be agile in your planning. And be able to answer to that. I know that and I'm not blaming Spirit Halloween or anything like that. Like, they have a system and their system works a certain way, but also we live in a world now where things go viral and what's popular changes like daily or weekly. And the cycle, I think, is probably a lot shorter than it used to be.
A lot of what you were just alluding to there is why a product-based business with extreme seasonality built into it really, I am not made for that type of a business.
No, me either, but
one of those.
I know a lot of people who are, and they do a great job at it. So yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say as well. I think there's that, looking too far ahead, but then at that time, you're not exactly, or it's being just too focused on pushing out that we're not really adapting. But before we go further, if you're sitting there doing the math on whether another brand or an offer or a location actually makes sense for your business, I've got something exactly for that moment. It's an easy tool that will make recommendations based on where you're at, and you'll get your results even before you need to hand over an email. So check out badassery.com/brand-scaling or catch it in the show notes. All right, let's look at the fix. How do you make sure in the operations, in the messaging, that these are both pulling in the same direction without one undermining the other?
Systems? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's a big one.
Anything in specific?
From my point of view, right, is so I've built my entire business around creating newsrooms for brands. And when I say a newsroom, I don't mean like a landing page where you put your press releases. It is your actual operations for every piece of content or every story idea that comes through your company. So if you're a franchise and you've got, hundreds of locations across the US, you don't want to have 100 different franchisees all doing their own messaging, and it's not necessarily cohesive to what your core business is trying to put out there. So when you have something like a newsroom, and this can work for small businesses too, where you are pulling content ideas in and you are regularly communicating with each other to figure out what works, what matches the business goals, what works for the audiences, and then you put them all out there, and you can collaborate with each other as teams. You can assign them to different locations, to different regions, to whatever, these different stories that are coming in. Now you've got a central location for all of your messaging. And so that's essentially what a newsroom does, is it's just organizes all of your editorial planning, all of your content calendars, all of your promotion plans. They're all in one place so that everybody who's involved in the business at all can look and see what's coming up and where to focus, and has a very cohesive message to work from.
I'm going to slice this question into a couple of different ways. So there's one path with scaling as it relates to locations, right, within franchising. And so, and I'm not talking about franchisor rolling out new locations, but a franchisee adding their second or third or fourth location and that type of scaling. That, you mentioned, Amanda, business goals, right? That the goals of that existing location, if you're going from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, whatever that jump is from a location count as a franchisee, there's some benefits, strong benefits to being within a franchise network when you're trying to do that. Because one, let's say you have one location, you already have a track record within that network, not just you, but other locations have a track record of expansion, right? And when it was the right time. And so there's a lot of data that can go into market penetration, demand within a specific area that you want to drop at that other location at. But we've got a playbook. You've got a playbook that the franchisor designed specifically for expansion and what needs to be in place in order for you to really get green light and get approved for that expansion. You also have real life examples of other franchisees that likely came in before you. Now, if you're a first adopter within a franchise system, that's a totally different ball of wax. But you have, more often than not, almost always, there's going to be franchisees in that network that expanded well before you were in that network, or well before you considered expanding to a second or third or more locations. So you have an existing playbook provided by the franchisor, and you also have an existing playbook and real life examples of existing franchisees. And so those business goals really I look at business goals from franchising as just KPIs from the franchisor. How is it doing? Is it operationally sound? Is it marketing sound? Is it growing? Is revenue? Are we taking revenue from the right places and growing where we expect it to? And so it's really just a climb to getting to that ready line on the heat meter, right? That is, demand and being ready, looking like you're ready is one thing, but it's the back end stuff, right? When you start adding just a location, not even talking about adding a different service or a different product, but when you start adding in the operational complexities of 2 locations versus 1, it's more, certainly out of the gate, it's more than double the work, even though it's only double the location. And so operationally, right, systems, you mentioned, Amanda, tremendously important. And that's not just, I don't just view that as like the operating system itself, but what's the system of movement within the office or the warehouse or of the mobile units? What does that look like? Who's answering the phone on the new location versus the existing? Are you forming a shared service platform where you have the same people answering for both locations? Ideally, that's the case. Are you doubling your staff at that point? Because that doesn't seem very efficient if you're just simply doubling. That doesn't really check the right boxes within scaling. So who is selling this stuff without running thin? Who's performing these services, right? Is there overlap from a staff perspective for location A and location B that you can leverage and make those folks' days busier, right? Instead of doing 8 service jobs a day, can they do 10, right? And there's also, a lot of those questions can get answered, again, to circle it back to the franchisees that have already done it before. And then the other thing is how much thinner does the owner or the general manager's world get by adding that? Is it time to bring in an assistant manager? There's always going to be additional staff, but in franchising, when you're adding a second location or a third, whenever you're adding, the biggest place to look at is within the existing staff of that franchisee, and can you make it more of a shared service without just doubling or tripling the staff as you add locations, right? You have to be able to get those synergies in place. Otherwise, growing the second one will be just as hard, if not harder, than the first, because you're doubling it, more than doubling the work and doubling your staff and doubling your expenses. And that's not the goal. The goal would be to take your efficiencies and make everything run smoother by adding that second location, at driving profits from, I'm making this up, but say it's 15% EBITDA within one location, and your second location, when it gets to critical mass, you should be doing 17% out of both, or 18%. You should be adding profits because of the efficiencies created by adding locations. It's not always possible, but if you're creative enough in how you do it, and your leadership skills and your management skills, you can do it. But a lot of it comes down to that staff. What are they doing? Are you running them thin? So there's that type of scaling and that type of planning. The more difficult path is when, something we've been talking about is adding in additional products or services, right? That's where things can get a little bit dangerous, because going back to those items, who's answering the phone? Well, you're talking about service A on this phone call, and you got to be ready to talk about service B on this next phone call. And then if it's service C, then your salespeople out there, whether it's B2B or B2C, whatever it might be, is that person well-versed enough to be able to sell to two different types of services to maybe the same customer, maybe two different customers, maybe they're just adjacent. There's, again, staffing is where you'll lose a lot of those efficiencies that you're hoping to gain.
Yeah, a lot. And, what keeps coming up is that communication side, and something that I'm seeing consistently break down, be it externally or even internally, where, say, for example, that person who's taking these calls, or, that person on the front end, they're out there serving customers, and they get feedback that information doesn't get passed into the rest of the team, where, you can make those adaptations, be it in marketing or be it in sales, having this communication between everyone and a clear line set up, so that it's hey, let's be consistent in how we're communicating, open to everybody to be hey, give us your feedback. What are you hearing down the line? So it's not just, the CEO or the founder guessing about what's going on, being oh, hey, I think, I think our customers want this, but they're mentioning, oh, I didn't even know down the line that they're doing something else. So that's a whole extra load of work to make sure that's set up. What have you guys seen, or where do businesses underestimate where the work is involved to set all of this up well?
From my perspective, it comes down to the operating system and that the capabilities of that system. Let's say that's in place. The other place where it will break, accounting will can break it, and then of course the support staff that I mentioned before, your customer service or what have you. Outside of the operating system, which is going to be usually more technical, IT focused, the other piece is training. That's where franchisors will, and franchisees will fall short. They will underestimate the real heavy lift of training. And really what you're doing is not retraining, but enhanced training to be able to take on the additional pieces, service loads, whatever it might be. And that's the bogey. That's one of the big bogeys, training.
Yeah. And on the content side, that gets lost a lot of times with a lack of communication between teams and departments, or if you're talking about something that has multiple locations, between those different locations not talking to each other. And so what I always recommend is taking this, I plucked this right out of my newsroom background, of regular editorial meetings. So you get together and one person, or ideally everyone, but everyone's busy in business, but you have somebody from every department on a call together. It's like 10, 15 minutes once a week. It's not like it's a big long meeting where you basically answer a prompt that if somebody isn't coming from a content background, of, what is one thing that made you smile this week? Or what is one thing that made you realize, oh, this is why I do what I do? And maybe you'll get a customer story. Maybe you'll get something that happened internally. Maybe you'll get, you can even ask this to accounting, and it might be something that came in through, to their desk. And this is how you get regular feedback and regular storytelling. So yes, operation system, yes, everything that John said, but you really need person-to-person human communication as well, because it's really easy for people to ignore an email or ignore, they're not, maybe, not everybody's as involved in the CRM or whatever, whatever you have to, your business organizational tools. Not everybody's going to be looking at all of that all the time. And if you have one place where you get together and from the content side of things, you're just saying, hey, what happened this week? And it kind of starts like banter, but then one person will say something and then somebody from a completely different department will say, I noticed that too. And suddenly you realize that there's a trend and there's a story. And now you have a really great piece of content that can be promoted in a million different ways. And so I think that on the content side, whether you're talking about PR, SEO, paid marketing, whatever it is, that you are coming together regularly and having editorial meetings.
Is there a power behind, I don't love the term because so many, you get phone surveys. The word is survey, but like phone surveys. And first thing you do is, no, thank you. I'm not doing that. But, from a customer as well as an internal mechanism, is there a strength in those surveys where it's if the survey is focused on very clearly, like what are you seeing that's good or experiencing that's good, and what are you seeing or experiencing that's bad? Right? Is that an occurrence that takes place that you see?
So if you're talking externally, and so you're going out and you're surveying customers, for example, I think that if you have a really specific, and I'm calling it a prompt, but something really specific that you're trying to get from them, you're going to get a better result than if you say, you'll always have the post-purchase, like, what did you think of us? And you give them 1 to 5 stars, and you might say, this was great. It worked great because of XYZ. If you give them a specific prompt and you do it more regularly, like, if it's a product, for example, how did you use your purchase this week or this month? Or what did you think of this feature of it? If you're a service, it can be the same sort of way. It's like maybe you were expecting a specific outcome and it was, how long did it take you to see this outcome? So that you're getting this feedback that is kind of guided and specific to what you really need to know as a company, as opposed to them just saying, yep, it was great, or I didn't like it. So I think that when you're talking about like getting customer feedback, that is something that's important. But to your point, people don't really like being surveyed. But I do think if you ask them something specific, that can help. If you're talking internally, that's why I like to have like a face-to-face instead of doing a survey. Again, I don't know, surveys are fine, but I really think that if you're talking to employees, it's a simple coffee chat. It's not like coming together and saying, let's all do a survey and then come together and talk about the survey. Like, nobody wants to do that. So it's much more loose. And when you have a system, a place to put all of that, I think that becomes really easy, and it'll start to become second nature to people. I've seen this happen where, a brand starts thinking in a way that, or the founders or the different departments start thinking in a way where, oh, that was interesting. And you just make a note of it. And that note comes up in an editorial meeting later down the road. And not everyone is going to attend all of those, but it's good to have, that regular discussion so that you can get fresh perspectives.
I don't agree that like we should lean into surveys. Like it's better to have that one-on-one conversation. So say, for example, some of your clients or customers, maybe you're chatting with a few on Instagram, maybe you're chatting with them in the comments, or you are having a call with them, or you're seeing them in the showroom, etc. And it's training the team, whoever it is, be it the marketing, be it like that customer service, and being like asking the how and the why questions instead of, the yes, no answer questions, and be like, okay, let's get some real feedback about your experience. So people, they're feeling like, oh God, these guys actually give a shit about me, for one. Right? And the second thing is that you're getting that data that will probably be a lot closer to what you need than a survey.
Right. And you can even get kind of creative with it and use social media creators to be your person who reaches out instead of it being coming directly from you. If somebody, for example, let's say that you're in like I'm going to say like the beauty space, because there's a million influencers who are in the beauty space. And if you sell a certain makeup brush, just for example, and you go to a creator and you ask the creator to say, hey, I'm using the brush in this way. Show me how you're using it. You're going to get more creative feedback than if you're the brand asking them to show you. And it just becomes, you're building community. It becomes more interactive. It's engaging. And you can use that feedback in multiple ways instead of it just being a brand survey that lives on an executive's desk and gets discussed in a meeting or two. So, I mean, that's one example, and obviously that's not going to work for every company, but yeah, just get creative and think about like how you're asking them.
I like that. I think that using a third party, you may get some more accurate, more honest answers on a good and a bad side. I like that a lot. I was going to ask, do you find that those editorial meetings are just lacking tremendously across so many different organizations and platforms? And I'm asking because I feel like they would, only because from an executive perspective, sure, I could see value in it, but it's not driving revenue. It's not driving the rollout, right? Or it's not driving revenue, right? And therefore, if it's not driving revenue, it's not driving profits. So I could see how it would be overlooked. That's a short-sighted view of it. By the way, that's not my view.
No, I know.
Of it, but,
I have an answer to it, though. It is driving revenue, but it is driving it from a long-term point of view. So there are things that you can do. You can put out an ad and you can track how many sales came from that ad. And then, hey, this was worth its money, right? But when you're talking about doing more long-term planning and you're looking at things from the bigger picture, it becomes a little bit more difficult to track how that is earning money. And I wish there's a stat and I wish I had it in front of me, but we're finding that it's like an insane amount of the percentage is really high of content that actually comes from public relations or comes from communications is driving revenue, but it's getting attributed to something else that's lower down in the funnel. But the thing is that if everything you're doing in your business is down in the lower part of the funnel, but you don't have that consistency and you don't have that brand building aspect that's up at the top, then you're not going to have longevity. And so the value in doing something like this is up there at the executive level. It is at a communications level. It's at the brand building level, where When you talk about brand building, and Beatrice, I know this is your jam, so you can weigh in a minute, but it's not just that you do a rebrand, or it's not just putting your logo together and saying, this is what we stand for, and then walking away from it. Your regular communications, your public relations work is an ongoing part of that. And so that's what feeds that lower level. And at some point, people are going to get tired of just another sale. You're not going to grow. So if you want to grow community, you want to grow trust, you want to grow engagement, then you need some kind of ongoing system to feed that pipeline with new, fresh stuff consistently. We're way past the time where a decade ago you could do a PR campaign, hire a PR firm to put out a press release, run, blast something out to a list of journalists for 3 months and get a lot of coverage, and that coverage results in a lot of sales. That's just not how it works anymore. The systems, the cycle, the sales cycle has changed a lot. You need to be consistent in that. And then I could go on like a tangent with LLMs and LLM visibility and the role that GEO plays in discovery now. But PR and that like brand building aspect, the editorial meetings at the top are all part of it.
There needs to be that underlying consistent message that's there, that consistent direction that drives everything from marketing, from the PR, the operations, the team, etc. And I noticed both of you mentioned as well going into a new location. So when a brand moves into a new region or a new country, things can break. Like, how Starbucks couldn't make it in Australia, outside of tourist centers, that is, because of the pre-existing coffee culture there. So what do you guys reckon? How much of the original story actually travels? Like, what should be kept?
I mean, who you are and what you stand for, that should be the same across, I think, every part of the planet. That I think is a consistent message to put out there. The distribution channels of that message, or how you adapt it to a different region or a different audience, that can change. But that like core of who we are, that has to remain the same. And, to the Starbucks example there, not everything is for everyone everywhere. So figuring that out before you go there, I think, is important.
And I'd be curious about I'm curious whether or not Starbucks did end up, everywhere through Australia. But I wonder, and I'd be looking to the two of you, like, to answer, is it, I'm oversimplifying, but is it a scenario where you create a different brand? Is it just the Starbucks name that is not going to be welcome, and you come up with a brand that feels more local, feels more native, if you will, and have the same machine in the background, same beans, same cups, different logo, different feel inside, different words used in descriptions and all that. And basically it's just instead of an Isuzu Rodeo, it's a Honda Passport. It's the same thing.
Maybe.
Right?
And obviously brands do that, right? But you can also look at McDonald's, for instance, and they have different menu items in different countries. So their core brand is the same globally, but they change up the way that their restaurants are built depending on where they're at.
I think it also really depends on where, what's the culture, even within the same country, right? There might be certain areas which are just completely against something. So the reason it didn't stick in Australia, like you'll only be able to find Starbucks where there's like a shit ton of tourists. Like you go to Sydney and there's a Starbucks there, but like you go outside and the way people approach having a coffee, it's completely different. Even like the flavors, etc. So the amount of sugar that Australians are used to go into their coffee, it's very different. So it's having that mindset and awareness of like, hey, maybe these things need to be completely changed. So that leads me to the question of like, okay, what's the thing that you guys seen, that businesses refuse to adapt because they think it's so close to the core of the brand when it's just really something familiar to them.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm like thinking through, everybody who I've worked with who's come from, and I'm using like global, right? Those that have come from other countries and have launched in the United States. I've been a part of a lot of those campaigns, mostly over the years in the e-commerce space. Packaging might be one that comes to mind. They think that the packaging that they have that works for, there's actually a brand that I'm thinking of that is Australian based. And what worked really well in Australia wasn't resonating as well with the United States audience. Because I think that the US consumer is maybe less environmentally minded. So this particular message just wasn't landing the way that they thought it would. But it did okay once they found a different, more niche audience here. But it didn't have the broad appeal that it had in Australia.
I work with a franchise brand that has Aussie in the name, and they are in the process of a full rebrand. And it's a good move. The original name was a bit clunky. Both of you would have just chewed it up and spit it out if you knew what it was. But where I see brands, I think some of what you were asking, Beatrice, is kind of, where's the reluctance to change or adapt kind of because this has been the way, right? I think a lot of brands run into issues with customer acquisition efforts, right? And, I think that this is the way we've always done it. This other way doesn't work, but you see many industries leaning into this already, this new path, and brands that, it's if you don't adapt, you're going to die kind of thing. Right. And, but customer acquisition, I feel like there's a lot of obvious franchise systems that just have not properly embraced, the use of even just digital marketing. Right. And so, or doing it, checking a box and saying, yeah, we do it, but doing it in a clunky or broken fashion. The other area that I see that has trouble evolving with some brands is the customer experience, right? We hear that a lot, or at least I do. And that customer experience, I think Apple changed a lot of the game from an experiential side of things because they were very vocal, like, no, we are the customer experience, right? Jobs was very clear on that. That experience is what's going to keep people loyal. And I think you can get that your experience with as fast as things move in this day and age, the experience can change and it can feel stale after a little while. And so being able to not drastically change, but nuance tweaks along the way for that experience to continually enhance it. That's where I think you'll see that I see innovation that is not taking place at a fast enough pace.
It leaves such a big gap open as well. So say, for example, it's like they've been so used to referrals, for example, as like, oh, this is what we've been using for decades. Everybody in the town, like they know us, but like this is like in their minds. But then as soon as somebody else comes in and even market a little bit, or they speak directly to that target audience and be like, oh, that audience, the customer going, hey, these guys know me. They know what I'm facing. They're speaking to me. Okay, yes, like these guys have been in the market for so long, but why not try something new? It's so easy to lose that track, to lose that possibility because you're so comfortable with like, this is how it's always been done.
Yeah, change is hard, right?
Change is very hard. Humans, we are bizarre animals, and our brains are rooted in not changing. And the funny thing about it is that our brains will logic our way out of not changing, right? Fear, anxiety, change gets masked as logic by humans, and that sounds logical. Oh, well, that should not happen. Well, all great things start with a significant amount of discomfort.
Exactly. So somebody listening, they're either about to add a brand, they're about to add an offer, or they're maybe thinking about moving to an additional location, or they've got some extras and something's feeling a bit off, where would you each tell them to start?
I'd be looking at the staff and what whoever is doing the actual work, what those internal processes look like, because you can, everything can look great from a technical side, an accounting, a finance side, a sales side, a marketing side, but the execution of it is where things that get lost, right? If all of those things are look to be in order and everyone agrees these are great, then if it's not working, it's going to be an execution issue, right? And that's so it's an operational gut check. It's an operational audit. It sounds really heavy, but I'd be looking at operational execution.
Yeah, I would look at I'm going to say I would look at the content, and I would look at how it is performing and what is performing well and what is falling flat. And that will tell you a lot about how your community or your perceived community is responding to your brand as a whole.
Okay, so there's one question that I ask every episode, and the answer doesn't necessarily have to be about the topic, what we just spoke about. And the question is, what is the one social norm that you want to push back against and teach others about?
So this one, I don't know why it popped into my head, but it comes up. It pops into my brain every once in a while. There's a social norm that that the handshake versus hug is what it is. The handshake versus hug. That you can build from a networking perspective, right? And you go out and you network and you meet all these people and you develop these relationships. And even as a man, when there's another guy, very few of them do I give do we do like a hug? It's always like really great to see you kind of handshake. But there's this thing that with women, and it's not just me, I've mentioned this to other people, that now that man and woman now do like the side hug, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the hug, and there's it's a warmer embrace, even if it's just like that side hug, not like a full embrace. And so there's it seems to be this social norm unwritten that if you're male and female, you do some sort of a bigger embrace, instead of just a handshake. And really, I'm fine with either personally, but it seems like there's a lot of times that a handshake would just be fine, and you don't have to get in someone's personal space and hug them when you see them in a professional or even personal social environment.
Are you saying that women go in for a hug instead of shaking your hand?
Both. Yeah, both.
Or men go in for hugs instead of the handshake.
I think it's both. That it's just it's after a relationship has already been established that the hug comes out, right? Not an initial meet, that it is that it's an established relationship. And there are far more men that I've established relationships with where we do not hug whatsoever, and a bunch of women that I see that I have relationships with that there are these hugs, and it's very confusing to know which one it is. And so it's a very personal decision, but it seems to be out of whack. Why can't all the men hug, or why can't all the men and women shake? It's just, there's something broken right there. So that's what I want to push back on, is what's the requirement when you have a relationship and you're not best friends or hanging out outside of a professional environment? That's why I high five everybody. That's exactly why I give everyone high fives.
Interesting.
So it's a weird one, and it's a nuanced niche that I just mentioned.
I'm going to be thinking about that for the rest of the day, because I'm trying to think of myself. I think if I'm in a business setting, I do the handshake a lot, but sometimes it's awkward, especially if it is people that you've met a lot. I actually go in for what I think is the bro hug, which is the handshake with the pat on your shoulder, kind of you know what I'm talking about? That's the bro hug. Yep. So I'll do a bro hug.
And I call it the one shoulder hug, where you are way off to the side.
A lot of times if I do that, it's because I don't want to hug you.
Yeah. For sure. But there's too many unwritten, and it's just, there's an There's an awkwardness there. I would prefer I would just prefer to make it easy for everyone, because a lot of people don't like to hug, even the side
Yeah.
hug. I would prefer we turn into a high fiver community, a high five
High five
society.
society. Or I like the respect
more
that
fun than
certain other
handshakes.
cultures use with a bow. That's very nice and respectful.
I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
I like that. The other that I would push back on is the reluctance to take on the metric system in the United States.
Fair. Fair.
My kids are 10 and 13, so they've dealt with trying to learn all of the measurements for, the last couple of years, and it drives them crazy.
Mhm.
So in turn, it drives me crazy.
That's a fair one. So I had to think about it for a minute. I think what I'm going to say is the idea that if it's not on social media, it didn't happen. Everybody has to feel like every event that happens in their life, they have to share it on social, or else there's like the idea that it didn't happen. And even if it's like with my own family, I'll tell them about something, but if I don't have pictures as proof, then it didn't happen, I travel a lot and I enjoy taking photos. Obviously, I'm a storyteller. I'm actually on, I'm on social media a lot and tend to overshare. But I think that, sometimes if I don't post, people assume like, oh, you didn't do anything this summer. And it's like, no, I did. I just didn't take the time to put it out there. I don't know. No, if it's not on social media, it didn't happen.
I think that's a brilliant one,
Yeah.
Amanda.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
That got deep.
They call me crazy because I'm facing all my giants.
Thank you so much, Amanda, John. No more excuses. No more branding band-aids. And to you, my badass listener, thanks for tuning in to the Art of Positioning podcast. If you loved this episode, please share and review. And you can reach out to Amanda and John and catch that brand scaling tool from the episode description. Thanks, yeah. Badasses equip the art of positioning.
A social norm that I want to push back against? I don't know. Oh, goodness. What a hard question, Beatrice.
Let's freaking go.